Siri, what's HomePod?
HomePod is a breakthrough wireless speaker from Apple that delivers amazing audio quality. You can control it using your voice with Siri. Hey, wait, that's me.
If you were to ask anybody about HomePod, I think their first reaction would be to say that it failed, but I don't think it has.
It is absolutely beautiful, and we call it HomePod. Yes.
A few years ago, Apple wanted to get into that home speaker market, and they did that with HomePod because it was so saturated by Google and Amazon. And if you were to look at just figures, then HomePod only has 5% of the market, but that doesn't mean that it's failed. When Apple released the HomePod, they said that they wanted to reinvent the way people listen to music, which is a bit dramatic because it hasn't reinvented anything. But what they wanted to do was focus on the quality of sound coming from the speaker, and they did, and it's paid off, because the sound quality of the HomePod is brilliant. That is one of the redeeming features of the HomePod, that it is miles ahead of anything that Amazon and Google are doing in terms of the sound of their speakers. It's also really good at just listening to you. It has 6 microphones that are dotted all around the speaker, and every time you say to it, Siri, what's this, what's that, it will listen and it will hear you almost every single time. Even when you're whispering into it or whispering from far away, it always will pick you up. And talking of Siri, that is probably one of the biggest letdowns of this speaker, where if you've used Siri before, you know what it's like, and it's the same on the HomePod as well. Apple promote this more as a smart speaker than a home assistant. And that's just because Siri can't do everything that the other home assistants can do. Now, Siri isn't bad, but if you compare it to what's out there already, then it's lacking slightly. If you want to ask it for timers or ask it to remind you something or send something over to your iPhone, then that's absolutely fine, it can handle that. But if you want to ask it any stupid questions, like maybe you want to ask it recipes or a bunch of questions in a row, then it's not going to be able to cope with it.
I can't find the answer to that on HomePod.
Siri in HomePod is less a family speaker and more a professional one. There's a couple of cool features as well with the HomePod, where if you've got your iPhone, you can tap it on top of the HomePod and it can cast over your music, or it can cast over your podcasts or whatever you're listening to at the time, but only with Apple Music or Apple Podcasts. It can't do this with Spotify.
I can't play from Spotify on this device.
I think the pricing of HomePod is probably one of the biggest issues, where it's priced, or it was priced when it came out a couple of years ago, at £329, and that's come down a bit since then, but still incredibly expensive for a home assistant or smart speaker, where you can get Amazon Alexas for £25, or you can get Google Homes mostly for free. I've got 5 of them in my apartment and I've only paid for 2. We've probably all read or heard someone speaking about how Apple should release the HomePod minis and everything like that, but I disagree. I don't think they should. I think they should stay and stick with HomePod, because the one thing of HomePod that sets it aside from everything else is the sound quality. And as soon as you release a mini version of this, you lose the sound quality, because it will sound exactly the same as everything else that's on the market, whereas at the moment, the HomePod sounds better than anything that's on the market. I think if they changed what Siri does and how intelligent it is and updated it a bit, I think the HomePod minis might be an idea, but at the moment with the way Siri is, there's just no need for a HomePod mini. I've got real mixed feelings on HomePod, because on one end of the scale, I really like the design of it with that mesh that covers it and how sleek and how easily it fits into your home. But then on the other side, it's the price of it, and it's just still too expensive. Even at £270, it's still too expensive. The sound of the HomePod though, and the ease of using it with the iPhone is brilliant. You can hand off calls and, like I said earlier on, music and podcasts. But if you have an Android phone, just a tip here, don't get the HomePod, because you can't even set it up without an iPhone. This is a almost iPhone exclusive product. But the question still is, has the HomePod failed? And if you look at it on the surface of it, yes, people do say it's failed. But until you get one of these in your apartment and you try it out, it's difficult to kind of tell you how good the HomePod is, because the sound is excellent. The way it looks is excellent, but then the negatives are what Siri can't do compared to what every other home assistant can do. And it's also the price. So it's one of those. Has the HomePod failed? I think it's failed as a mass product. But I think amongst the small amount of people that buy it and the niche amount of people that buy it, I don't think the HomePod's failed.